The Center for Disease Control released a new study that went from the beginning of the pandemic through the Delta outbreak in the autumn of 2021. The data shows that during May 2020 to November 2021, case and hospitalization rates were highest among people who were unvaccinated without a previous diagnosis of COVID. So that means if you had no natural immunity from actually having COVID and you did not have the vaccine, you were the most likely to be hospitalized from COVID. What was interesting about this is that people who had a previous COVID infection but did not get the vaccine were just as immunized as people who had the vaccine but no previous COVID, which shows to you that natural immunity is just as strong, if not stronger, than getting a pharmaceutical-made inoculation, right?
Well, and the thing that's not saying is that you're actually more secure because we've now know that you can get and transmit with the vaccine.
Yes,
Right.
This data didn't specifically say, though, that you couldn't transmit it. This was looking at rate of hospitalization. So they do consider a recovered person less transmissible. That's why someone who's recovered doesn't have to retest in the next 180 days because we assume they are not actively shedding virus, whether they have it in and around their person, right? But yes, you make a good point. The data, I don't think, specifically said that. It's a lot of medical mumbo jumbo, but from what I could read, it didn't say anything about infecting people. But it did show that there was no added benefit of getting a vaccine or a booster after natural infection because you were just as inoculized. Right. Is that a word? You were just as inoculated.
Or immunized. Immunized.
Right.
But look at this. I mean, this is the chart, right? This is the big chart.
Yes.
Because if you see, unvaccinated, so in dark blue here, right? Unvaccinated, no previous COVID-19 diagnosis, okay? And then look down here at the bottom. Vaccinated, okay, in this blue check. Vaccinated, no previous COVID-19 diagnosis, right? But then the difference between that and then the unvaccinated previous COVID-19 diagnosis
is the black dashes.
Yes. No, the unvaccinated. Right here. See here, it's hard to even see. It's like right there. See the light blue in this chart? I mean, look at that. That's really remarkable.
So now we refer you to Dr. John Campbell's YouTube videos. He does a fantastic job of breaking these things down. He does say what the media will tell us is that the most at-risk population is no previous COVID, no vaccine. What he says is a rational thing to do in that instance is to get yourself vaccinated. But it doesn't make sense to say, well, then I'd rather the natural immunity and go and, lick someone's face who has a COVID diagnosis. Don't do that. But he
Or you could take the preventative measures too. That the jab is not the only solution. There are preventative things too.
Yes. So, but he is saying that this population, though, not controlling for anything else that you're doing, right? Undiagnosed COVID, no vaccine.
Let's listen to what he has to say here.
Okay.
This is the power of natural infection. Now, the CDC have not strayed into this territory before, but it's here now. So if you've had the natural infection, whether you get vaccinated or not, doesn't improve or reduce your risk of hospitalizations. It stays equally low. The only people that had a slightly higher risk here of hospitalization were this group here with vaccinated but no previous COVID-19 diagnosis. So their risk was higher. So we see that the natural infection is given greater protection or slightly greater protection than vaccination if that vaccination is not accompanied by natural infection.
That's pretty remarkable. And where's the mainstream media on this story? Zero.
Right.
I mean, trying to find the mainstream media discussion about this is impossible to find. In fact, Ron Johnson, the Wisconsin senator, is going to be holding a meeting today a Senate meeting today with a number of doctors on the status of COVID, questions answered and unanswered, basically. And the mainstream media, people who've been covering it on their YouTube channels, have had their videos removed.
His video get removed too. He had a Senate hearing that's been removed like 3 times.
Yeah, he's a senator, and he's holding a hearing with doctors.
Yeah, and he invited the heads of the CDC. He invited Fauci. He invited the heads of the drug companies. Like, he invited all of them, and not a single one of them even responded to his requests.
So then the question becomes, why is the CDC telling everyone to get boosted or get a vaccine if there is a natural immunity that has a measurable effect for people with previous COVID diagnosis? Why do they blindly give people with previous COVID diagnosis the jab, right? Specifically, like my father had COVID fairly early on in the pandemic and has had both of his vaccines and his booster. And I asked him, who advised you on that? And he goes, nobody. I just went and did it. And I was what? Shouldn't there be some regulatory body that's saying you have enough, or can we measure it, or something like that? But no, it's just open to all. And I was kind of thinking that if we give the CDC the benefit of the doubt, when you have a small baby, they want you to give that baby all kinds of jabs, right? And they will say, we're going to do all of these jabs in your 2-month appointment. And then the next one you get, like, for instance, one of my children, they wanted to give her 9 shots at her 2-month appointment. And I was like, no, why are you doing that? And they said, well, we do as many as we can. They also didn't have the combination DTaP, so they tried to give it to her in 4 different needles. And they said, we just do it as much as we can because we're afraid parents won't come back. And I was like, I will come back. You get to pick 2 today. I'll come back in a month and do 2 more. So, the mentality is that they're so scared that people will not get these jabs that they overcorrect without any kind of science about whether it's right or wrong.
Well, and that's the thing I was going to talk about. There's an active campaign that they're calling it super immunity. If you had COVID and get the jab, that you have the best super immunity. So they're making it sound like even if you have natural immunity, which is far superior, you should take the risks that could be involved in the jab and do it anyway for that super powerful Superman immunity. And they're doing it like with a cape and showing it like it's insane how they're just ignoring this.
And I was wrong. The Senate hearing was yesterday, the Senator Ron Johnson hearing, and it was not put on major mainstream media, but doctors talking in the room. He asked a panel of doctors and medical experts how many of them have been censored and silenced as a result of it, and it was not carried by any of the major news networks, and it was blocked. It was blocked from YouTube and it was blocked from other places. Which is really remarkable. Here he was yesterday for this important panel discussion. And look, I'm not a huge fan of him in any respects. I think there's things that Ron Johnson has done in the past. I've been critical of him for past policy decisions and criticisms. But on this, holding these hearings and then having it censored, regardless, it's a discussion with doctors.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, people always are like, that guy is a Republican, I'm not going to listen to him. It's like, I don't get my information from Joe Rogan, or I don't get my information from a podcast. You're not listening to Ron Johnson. What Ron Johnson has done is he just opens the floor and gives them a forum to be able to speak their mind so that we can hear what's going on. He's brought on people that have had adverse reactions. Thousands of them have, and he gives them a voice that nobody else is giving them. And he's not the one saying, look at me. This is all what I'm saying. He's just letting them talk. So ignore your feelings about the fact that he's a Republican. Ignore what you feel about Ron Johnson and listen to the people.
Right. I was listening to the Barry Weiss podcast where she had on a group of doctors who have been ostracized for saying things that are truthful. For instance, one of them said, I really believed that the vaccine was going to stop the infection and stop the spread. I've been disappointed in the efficacy rate. But if you say that, then it's almost as if you're saying something political, right? That should not be political. We all, at this time last year, hoped that the vaccine would stop the infectious spread. It did not. We at least have to be able to agree on that in order to have reasonable discussions about what's the right next step.
Yeah, we all believed wholeheartedly 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Like, we all put our faith in that.
Yeah.
Jason Frank has a question in the chat. I'm trying to find it now. Maybe you can put it up on the screen.
Let me see here.
Does anyone know if you need an emergency blood transfusion and you aren't vaccinated, can you be given unvaccinated blood?
If you need an emergency blood transfusion and you aren't vaccinated, can you be given unvaccinated blood? I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, we're not medical professionals for sure on the show, but the thing is, like, if the person, it's a viral infection, not bloodborne.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
I mean,
I do
we're
know
not medical professionals, but
the story that we brought you last week here on the show is that they are trying to get blood right now from those who have had natural immunity.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're seeing, like, if you've had COVID, please donate blood, because now that natural immunity, we can now inoculate other people by donating the blood. The plasma that goes into this other body now provides that additional extra layer of natural immunity for that person. So, the antibodies are already in that blood.